So let's talk about bloodworms. Bloodworms are one of the most popular yet misunderstood foods in the aquarium hobby. While they're often treated as a superfood, they're biologically more like a protein bar. They're kind of like a chocolate bar, excellent for short bursts of energy and growth, but potentially harmful if you use these as a staple everyday diet for your fish or your shrimp. But let's see if we can see this female here. She's looking fantastic. Beautiful female Amano shrimp. So here are some key facts about feeding frozen bloodworms to shrimp and fish, specifically regarding health and breeding. So one fact is conditioning. So when it comes to conditioning, bloodworms are the primary tool used for conditioning fish and shrimp for breeding. So the trigger here is in the wild, an abundance of insect larvae signals to the fish that the rainy season has started. This triggers a hormonal response in the fish that says there's enough food now for babies because all of these flies are laying eggs and all of these larvae are appearing here in your home, whatever natural water source they live in, whether it's a lake or a stream or even a little creek. Whenever the flies show up and start laying lots of larvae, typically that's going to be in the months where it's best for those little fish to start breeding. So just the mere presence of bloodworms can trigger a breeding response in your fish that wouldn't normally be there in your aquarium. Now for egg production, the high protein and fat content in bloodworms help female fish and shrimp produce larger clutches of eggs and recover faster after they spawn. So for shrimp, breeders often feed bloodworms a couple times a week, specifically to saddled females. So we'll see if we've got one in here we can showcase. This female here is both saddled and berried. So the berries are the eggs under the female Amano shrimp's tail. We call that in shrimp breeding, we call that being berried once they have all of those eggs. So we'll showcase this one here because she's in a good spot to see. So on this female shrimp, under her tail there's actually a ton of little eggs that she's kind of storing there until they hatch. Now on a shrimp's back are their ovaries. So once you see a solid color form in a shrimp's back, we call that being saddled because the area of the back where those eggs appear kind of looks like a saddle. So the best way to show you a saddle is we'll take a quick look at one of these snow Amano shrimp here, and you can clearly see that solid white color. That is a full saddle of eggs on this female shrimp. Now, if we go over to the yellow shrimp here, you'll see the berries. They're a little easier to see on these solid color Amano shrimp, but you'll see all those eggs she's kind of juggling under her tail. So that would be a saddled and berried shrimp. And with these Amano shrimp, they're very, very prolific breeders, meaning that these females, which this is a wonderful looking male example here, you'll notice there's no saddle, there's no eggs, but the female Amano shrimp are constantly saddled and berried. And as soon as those eggs that they keep tucked under their tail hatch and those larvae swim away, the female will shed her exoskeleton. She will molt. And after the female Amano shrimp molts her exoskeleton, she'll release a pheromone to let the males know that it's time to fertilize the eggs that are on her back currently. So the males do their thing, and then the female Amano shrimp moves the eggs from on her back to up under her tail internally. And as she does that, they pass through a package that was left by the male. They become fertilized, and from there we get beautiful baby Amano shrimp larvae. And if you're curious about raising Amano shrimp larvae, I do it on my channel using the easiest, beginner-friendly, never seen before me methods of raising those little tiny larvae in salt water that I promise you can do at home. If you want a couple extra Amano shrimp, maybe you want to start selling Amano shrimp, maybe you just want to experiment with it, or believe it or not, you can feed the Amano shrimp larva to your fish. So if you want to look into all those things, make sure to check out the channel. Now, when it comes to bloodworms, there is a nutritional reality to this: iron and protein. Bloodworms are red because they contain hemoglobin, right? Now, when we look at these bloodworms here, these are frozen bloodworms. And so they're not exactly as bold red colored as they would normally be when they're still alive. But we can see some of that red hue still left in these bloodworms. Now, they are red because of that hemoglobin, which is the same protein found in red blood cells, and that's what carries oxygen in our bodies. So it gives your shrimp or your fish an iron boost. This high iron content is excellent for enhancing the red coloration in fish like your betta fish or discus, or even in your cherry shrimp. And it prevents anemia in rapidly growing fry, whether it's little baby shrimp like these are tiny little orange eye Neocaridina shrimp. Now, although these bloodworms do have protein, it's considered an incomplete protein, and no one really talks about that. So what does that mean, that bloodworms are an incomplete protein? While they're high in crude protein, it's roughly almost half the dry weight of the bloodworm. If you feed only bloodworms to your fish or your shrimp, they may eventually suffer from malnutrition or even stunted growth because they're not getting the necessary vitamins like calcium and vitamin C. Now, there's also a little bit of an addiction danger when it comes to some fish that can be picky. Bloodworms are essentially fish candy. They have very strong scent to them and a taste that most fish just find irresistible. They're very palatable for your fish. So if you feed bloodworms daily, a lot of fish, especially betta fish, puffers, or discus that can be picky, they'll often refuse to eat dry pellets or flakes. They'll effectively go on a hunger strike until they get more of that candy. And that could lead to long-term health issues. So now, there are some digestive risks when it comes to these bloodworms. One of the most frequently talked about is thawing out the frozen bloodworms. Some fish keepers can be a little quick to add the bloodworms to their aquarium, and there are some people that just add them straight to the aquarium while they're frozen. And if you do that, there are some risks to that. If your fish do eat, essentially what could be ice, it would be the best way to explain it, is they're eating frozen bloodworms, and the fish's body temperature is much higher than that. But the digestive risks that we'll talk about here is the tough outer exoskeleton that these bloodworms have. They're made of chitin. So African cichlids, goldfish, these species have very long digestive tracts designed for plants. So they can often struggle to digest the chitin shells of bloodworms, leading to bloat or dropsy, which can often be fatal. Now, overfeeding bloodworms and bettas is the #1 cause of swim bladder disease. They get that constipation and bloating from the high fat and protein, plus those tough shells cause an impaction. It's hard for them to pass them fully through their digestive tract. Here's a great shot of one of these Amano shrimp chowing down on a bloodworm here. And it looks like this is another male Amano. We'll get him in focus here. Just a beautiful look to these red Amano shrimp. Now, they have a sun orange mutation where we can clearly see the markings on that shrimp are a deep red color. So I've been selectively breeding them to try to get the most red that I can, dealing with the available palette that this particular mutation causes. It's really not even a mutation per se, because this is the same pattern on this Amano shrimp in particular that you would see more or less on a wild type Amano shrimp. Those dots and dashes there, pretty much the same pattern on that Amano shrimp. So let's take a look at the next tank over here. We've got some of these snow Amano shrimp. They're a really cool looking white color. I always say, to me, they look like a glass sculpture. They almost look like a toy version of an aquarium shrimp. So we're raining down the bloodworms. And yeah, you see that takedown there. These Amano shrimp don't play around. They've been around each other long enough in these breeder tanks that they know that if they allow it, one of the other shrimp is going to steal their food from them. So you'll see a lot of chasing and fighting going on until they kind of figure out that the food isn't just what that one shrimp is carrying around. The food's actually here in the middle. So like I said before, they'll grab some bloodworms and then they take off, because they know if they stay on the move like this, they're less likely to get the food actually stolen. So you'll see them immediately getting the bloodworms and just swimming off with them. And that even sometimes triggers the other shrimp to chase that particular shrimp around instead of hunting around on the bottom for the food. It's a pretty interesting phenomenon with these shrimp. But these snow Amano shrimp, another variety of colorful Amano shrimp that has just not been available for very long in the United States. Now, this is a true mutation. This is essentially a leucistic version of an Amano shrimp, meaning it doesn't have any color at all to it, not even a pattern on the sides. There's no dots or dashes, and there's no base color to these shrimp. Now, they're not exactly perfectly clear. There is a little bit of a translucent look to these shrimp, but you can see through them a bit. And we can see on this one here how you can see through the head area of that shrimp. And it's just, to me, like I said, it looks almost like a glass sculpture. They're very beautiful, and they're a high contrast to black backgrounds, to dark color aquascapes like we see here, and even a great contrast to your aquarium plants in your aquascape. But because they're this neutral color, they don't take away from that beautiful color of your plants. So if you're trying to really highlight some red colors, or maybe some purples, or even just the greens of your planted aquarium, and maybe you've got some, one or two types of colorful fish, as a lot of serious aquascapers out there only use like one color of fish. They don't want to take away too much from the color pop of the plants. These snow Amano shrimp can be a really cool neutral color addition. So yeah, I've got a baby Neocaridina shrimp or two in this tank as well, and they're happy to feed on these bloodworms. I'm surprised we haven't really seen them get pushed around too much, but I think it's just because I'm putting enough bloodworms in there that everyone's able to come out and get one and then kind of disappear with it off to the side. Now let's talk about live bloodworms versus frozen bloodworms versus freeze-dried bloodworms. The ultimate for triggering hunting instincts would be live bloodworms, but obviously they carry risks of introducing live parasites or even diseases into your aquarium that would be killed off by freezing those bloodworms. So I don't think, especially if you're using wild caught live bloodworms, that is a very good idea to introduce to a breeding colony. So frozen bloodworms, like what we're using here in this live stream, are typically going to be your safest balance, and the freezing process kills most parasites but retains all of the nutrients. You never want to throw the cubes directly into your aquarium. Now, I know there are some fish keepers that do it, and shrimp keepers that'll just put them straight into the aquarium frozen and they don't have any issues. But it's an easy thing to do to just simply thaw them out first to avoid any possible issues where the risk is worth the reward of spending a little extra time, I guess would be the risk. But if you flip it the other way, the risk of harming your livestock is not worth the reward of saving some time. So the way that I've done that today is I actually am just using a little feeding dish for the shrimp. This feeding dish would go inside of an aquarium typically. And I've got a little bit of water in there, and the frozen bloodworms are thawed out at this point. So I'm not worried about any issues with that. Now, you want to thaw it in a cup of tank water and then try to strain it if you can. Now, in a larger tank, it's not going to take up too much nutrients into that larger tank, but especially for me working with a 2.5 gallon, that juice that kind of you get from thawing out the frozen bloodworms, it's full of phosphates, and that can contribute towards algae blooms. To be honest, in these 2.5 gallons with 5 adult Amano shrimp, algae doesn't stand a chance in these tanks. Now you'll see there's some powdered algae like on the walls of the tank. They don't really consume the powdered algae very much. I actually find snails and the baby Neocaridina shrimp on the walls of the tank more, but when it comes to any kind of hair algae, blackbeard algae, string algae type stuff, it cannot survive in these 2.5 gallons with 5 Amano shrimp. It's just not possible. They eat so much algae that the algae just stands zero chance of taking hold in these small nano aquascapes. So when it comes to freeze-dried bloodworms, you've got to know about allergies with humans. Believe it or not, there are humans out there, and they don't even realize it, that they've got allergies to the bloodworms. The hemoglobin in bloodworms is a potent allergen. So repeated contact with the skin, like touching the cubes or inhaling dust from the freeze-dried cans of bloodworms, can cause some hobbyists to develop hives, itchy eyes, or even asthma. Now, you want to wash your hands after you handle any freeze-dried bloodworms. For most people, not a problem, but if you're in that small percentage that can or is predisposed to being allergic, then you definitely need to know that. So you want to use bloodworms for maximum health and breeding success without the risks by feeding just a couple times a week. You always want to make sure that frozen cubes are thawed out and that you drain that waste type liquid that you get. You always want to pre-soak freeze-dried worms if you can to get a little bit of liquids back in them and cut down on that dust a little bit. And try to feed what your livestock is going to eat within an hour.